Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to this edition of the Here to Serve podcast. We are closing out Women's History Month this week, and I'm excited to welcome two incredible women in tennis leaders to the podcast. First up, we have Jolynn Johnson Smith. Jolynn is currently the president of the Whirlwind Johnson Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to celebrating the legacy of her grandfather. Jolynn is a former ranked player in the USTA and a national champion in the ATA, where her grandfather created the Junior Development Program. Jolynn spent time coaching urban youth in the National Junior Tennis League and has assisted coaches with tennis programs in Richmond, Virginia. She is a frequent speaker at tennis-oriented events, and she has participated in the USTA Centennial Celebration, highlighting the efforts of her grandfather. Joining Jolynn on the podcast today is Michelle Curry. Michelle is currently the COO of the Althea Gibson Community Tennis Association, and she's the administrator of the estate of Althea Gibson. Michelle began her tennis journey as an assistant tournament director for the Althea Gibson Foundation back in 2003. She also served as secretary for USTA Eastern and has won the USTA Eastern Volunteer of the Year Award. She holds an MPA from Ashford University and a BA in Psychology and Sociology and Social Work from Rutgers University. She is currently an adjunct professor of human services at Metropolitan College of New York. Both of these incredible women have amazing histories in tennis, and they also are amazing leaders in business and community. I hope you enjoy this conversation with Jolynn and Michelle, and as always, feel free to leave your comments and questions on our social media channels. Jolynn and Michelle, thank you so much for joining me today on the Here to Serve podcast. It's such a pleasure to have you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Of course. And of course, it's March, which is my favorite month. It's Women's History Month. We just celebrated International Day of the Woman, which is so exciting. And I thought maybe we could start by asking each of you to share with us what women in tennis have most inspired you and why. So, Michelle, would you mind going first, and then Jolynn will go to you second?
Absolutely. Well, my favorite person in and out of tennis is actually Althea Gibson. And the joy of my life, besides raising my two sons, is managing and administrating her estate and also working closely with entities such as you, the USTA, the ATA, working with Jolynn and Dr. J's estate. I mean, bringing those village people right into my life has given me the support and the love that I can only imagine is a fraction of what Althea got from her village. So I am thankful to represent Althea. I always have to give thanks to Katrina Adams, another woman in tennis who stands tall in my eyes. Leslie Allen, Zena Garrison, of course, the Williams sisters. They have all played a part and gave support to Althea. And if I forgot anyone, please charge it to my head and not my heart.
I'm going to use that, Michelle. Jolynn, how about you? When you think about women in tennis who have most inspired you, who comes to mind?
So I'm probably going to date myself a little by saying this, but I agree with Michelle that Althea, for women of color, was someone that, we could relate to. And I think mainly because of her involvement with my grandfather and Dr. Hubert Eaton, she allowed herself to be shown different ways to success through tennis education and also perseverance. Now, there were a couple of other women that I grew up in DC, so my siblings and I would play over at Rose Park in Georgetown, and Romania Peters was still alive, this was probably back in the 70s, and we had the occasion to play tennis over there with her. And they subsequently named that park after she and her sister. But Romania beat Althea in one of the ATA tournaments, probably back in the 50s or might have been 40s for that matter. And then Lucy Diggs Slow was also another person. I was not as familiar with her, but have come to be familiar because both she and Althea were in my sorority. So, I have to give them credit for that. And also Lucy also was one who won some major tournaments in the ATA. So I would give it, not discrediting any of the others that came along. I think in my generation it was Chris Evert. I mean, I still have a wooden Chris Evert tennis racket that I found at a yard sale, but I used to play with that same racket before they went to graphite and these other types of rackets. But I mean, Althea was kind of the one because it was so long ago that she was credited with breaking the barrier, between 1941 and 58 when she was able to win the US Open and Wimbledon. So she's often forgotten in that regard. I think people always give Ash the credit of, oh, he's the first and only African American male. But I always want to go back and say, mention Althea first. She's the first. So I think she deserves to get, big kudos for all that she has done.
I love mentioning her, and that's a theme I've heard so much over the last several years, is that, Althea hasn't gotten the credit and the due that she deserves for being the first. And I think that you all and several other advocates in our network are doing great work in making sure that anytime anyone asks the question about the first in terms of breaking any barrier, that that's the name that comes up first. So thank you very much for that. We're going to come back to Althea and Dr. Johnson in a minute, but you two are both inspiring women in many ways in your own right. I think our audience will agree with me in that. And so, Jolynn, I want to come back to you for a moment. You mentioned you grew up in Washington, D.C., and I think you ended up playing on the men's tennis team at Fisk. And I think Althea also played on the men's tennis team at FAM, if I'm not mistaken about that. So can you talk a little bit more about your journey in tennis and how that has helped drive your successful career as a business leader today?
So I will say that my journey into tennis began in utero because after being born, I learned a little bit later down the road the impact of my grandfather's excuse me, his success in promoting African Americans in tennis. And so every summer until he got sick in 1971, my siblings and I would go to Lynchburg. We were happy to escape the big city life of DC away from our parents. And excuse me. And so we started to play, or we would creep on the court when these other players left the court and maybe went to have lunch or something, because we weren't really considered, the top players. So it began there, playing in Lynchburg, and then we learned about Dr. J's impact of having coached over 200 African American players. But then when I got ready to go to college, I was accepted at Fisk University in Nashville, and they had a female tennis team, but I just thought they were kind of weak. I said, I've got to play with the guys. So it was nothing more than me pushing myself to say that I know I can qualify to play on this team. And I did just enough to get the number 6 spot on the team so I could travel. And the only other problem was that the coach cautioned me and said that if he doesn't travel to an out-of-state tournament, that I couldn't go. So I only went to because it was all guys, and he wanted to be mindful of the fact that I was the only female. So I remember we played Vanderbilt, and they had a heck of a team, of course. And I probably got the most games of anybody on the team. Everybody, I mean, we all lost ultimately, but I got the most games. So I'll take credit for that. And then we played at Alabama A&M in Huntsville. And the first guy that I was to play, he refused to play me. He said, I'm not playing her. So, I was like, oh my goodness. And then they put me together with another guy, and I played and beat him. And I mean, he was very gracious about it, but it just, it was just mind boggling because I guess I didn't realize that guys would not like to have been beaten by a female. But, Fisk had a decent enough team, and I was just happy. I didn't play. After that, I ended up transferring back to DC to go to Howard, but and then my dad was the tennis coach at Howard. So but by the time I got back and got in there, he had left the position. So I was just happy to say I qualified, and since I'm the only female since that occasion to even play on the men's team.
Did that experience give you a perspective going into business and what it would be like to be maybe the only woman or the only woman of color in the room?
Well, interesting that you would say that. I mean, when I think about it now, I can certainly attach some of the things that I learned to that. I don't think I thought about it that deeply at the time, but I'll be honest with you to say that I think that playing gave me the mental stamina to persevere. I also, have the tenacity. I don't let things get me to the point where I give up and I say, I'm not going to do this or I can't do it. There have been challenges, no doubt. And there have been many occasions where I was the only African American in some of the jobs. I After coming back to Washington, I worked for a major TV network for 7 years. And, of course, experienced some of that where I was the only African American female or one of a couple. And also when I started working in HR, I was the only African American that was full time in that role. And it was tough because a lot of times people aren't ready for us. But again, my mother said to me on occasion where I got really frustrated with the job at NBC, and she said, I would not let that person impact your ability to stay on that job. You like the company, you like what you do, you like the people, then hang in there and persevere. So yeah, I would say, I developed a lot of mental strength, tenacity, perseverance, and also diplomacy, because while I may not have agreed with a lot of things and still don't agree with a lot of things that happen, um, I have to put things in perspective, and I can't just blow up. And these are things that my grandfather taught us well. Don't lose your cool, which my sister and I never did. My brothers, that's another story. I mean, it was kind of John McEnroe-ish. Um, but you just learn to kind of be cool about it. I mean, you could have been seething with anger, but I do think that those life lessons helped a lot of us persevere and be able to do the things that we've been able to do later in life.
Mhm.
That's great advice. I love that. It's great advice for me and for, anybody today. I see you were nodding a lot there, Michelle. So I'm curious, for you, not only are you the executive director of the Althea Gibson Family Trust, but you also are a leader in nonprofit civic engagement. I was watching some of your podcasts on that or videos. I don't know. So I did a little bit of my homework there, and I just would love to hear more about your journey in tennis and what drives you to both advocate for Althea, but also empower communities in the way that you do outside of tennis?
Yeah, it's my journey started a little bit different. As a little girl, I wanted to play tennis. I don't know why. It was tennis and volleyball, which are really odd for a colored girl growing up in the 70s. But so I was always aware of tennis. My involvement came in 2002 when my aunt Fran Gray, who at that time ran the Althea Gibson Foundation, um, asked me to help her on a daily basis once she realized that she was diagnosed with MS. So I started going into the office and I had a crash course of the business side and the advocacy side of tennis. And to me, it was very engaging because my background is also social work. So I look for solutions and how I can make every day easier and better for people so that they can thrive instead of just survive. And learning about Althea the way that I did through my aunt and through the people in her village, um, I think that's where she was too. Althea ran for Senate here in New Jersey. She was very big on engagement and activism in her community to make her places and spaces better. Which is where I live. Kind of being a social worker, that's what I'm all about. So the marriage of the civic space to the tennis space became very easy for me. And working and learning about how to set up a draw. Oh boy, that was fun. Um, managing tournaments and kind of like mediating between parents and umpires and all those type of things. It kind of is what I did every day. So I became oh, Michelle will do that. Let Michelle do that. And once I actually started to manage her estate, after my aunt passed away in 2019, that's really when I met Jolynn and I met, the other stronger parts of Althea's village. And to me, a village does make your place and space better. And one of Althea's, most famous quotes and my favorite is, no matter what you've accomplished, you didn't do it by yourself. And her acknowledgement of the people in her circle, whether they were a hands-on portion of the circle or just a cheerleader in that circle, she felt it. And that is the trickle down that we need in a civic environment, so that we can all leave a footprint, make our places and spaces better, and just understand that we're not here alone, and that the actions we do today will trickle down and impact people we'll never, ever, ever meet in our lifetime. So we kind of want that to be a positive footprint instead of a negative footprint.
Love that. And I think that's the intersection that we as USTA should sit in too, is that intersection of civic engagement and making communities better. And it's my favorite part of our work, although I'm with you in terms of the difficulty of learning the tournament and the competitive space. It's like a different kind of puzzle over there. But
Yes. Yes.
there's something really special about that community engagement piece.
Yes. And the USTA has been beyond supportive, in this journey to shine a light on Althea and, that entire journey, because that journey doesn't just include Althea, it includes, Lucy Dixon, it includes all the women that came before her as well as after her. So they have been gracious in acknowledging that journey, as has the ATA. So, to me, I have the light part. I just get to share, I just get to share. So I have the light part.
Well, the celebration is certainly going to get even better this year, I think. And I'm very excited for that. I did want to come back to Althea and Dr. J for a minute. So my question for you both is, what lessons from their stories still apply to us today? And so, Jolynn, I'd love for you to start and talk a little bit about what lessons and we could take away from Dr. J's story and how he, opened doors for people that maybe we can use to inspire our actions today?
Well, I would say that with any of the students and his grandchildren, he always wanted us to be respectful. He was never I never heard him raise his voice with anyone. He was very soft-spoken, but people also knew because he had very stern eyes that he was not playing with you either. So you had to be respectful, no profanity, um, which, one of my brothers was sent home on a Greyhound bus as a young child because he was banging his racket and, losing it out there on the court. And my grandfather called my dad and said, "Oh, I'm putting him on the bus. He'll be there by 4 o'clock. Meet him at Greyhound." And that was his punishment. I would say tact and diplomacy. I mean, teaching people to be tactful, and I look at the tennis channel every day, because I love to see, who's playing, who's winning, and all that stuff. And the interesting part about it is that sometimes we are not so tactful and diplomatic about stuff. And so, I mean, again, this is a lesson that carries over into everything that we do. If we want to blow up at somebody in the grocery store or not, I think these are things that should be in the back of our minds. And I think there's also a point of never giving up, because it's easy to feel sorry for yourself and, say, "Oh, I can't do it. I can't do it." But if you persevere, like there were subjects in school that I hated. I hated. But when I went to grad school, I realized that if I studied this stuff every day, and once I did study it every day, it got better for me. So being able to not give up on whatever your dream is. And I also think that most, I would say 99% of the people that came through his program were very successful. These guys went on to become doctors, lawyers, judges, architects, um, you name it. Just everything from A to Z professionally. And I think it's a testament to what he stood for. Um, he wanted to be a doctor, and he had to earn the money to go to medical school. So he was a red cap in the train stations in New York. And that's how he earned money every summer. So, again, it's a lesson to us. You can do it if you want it, but you're gonna have to work hard. And and the other big thing was that education was a must. We had to become educated. And if he was able to get people scholarships to colleges, he did so. He helped family members go on to medical school. Um, his sister became a doctor. He sent her to the University of Geneva. My dad went to med school in Switzerland also, but had to drop out. But he helped them along the way. And so I just think that there's a lot of encouragement there of helping people, but also teaching them that no, it's not easy, but if you want it bad enough, if you want to be the champion, I looked at Madison Keys win that match the other day. You know, Wonderful for her. Wonderful, she won the Australian. I mean, she's been working hard, and when the timing is right, it happens.
Love that. Michelle, what do you think we can take away from Althea's story that still apply to us today?
Well, the dignity. Whenever I see Althea, what she represents to me is regal dignity. The fact that she withstood, that she was tactful, that she did not show her emotions. She didn't let her emotions lead her. As Jolynn said, no matter if she was seething with anger, that did not show because she understood that there was something much bigger than that at stake. Um, the motivation, the determination, the good competitive spirit, that she had, which also leads to the focus, being focused, being consistent, being, all of those other attributes that come with learning how to be competitive, how to win and how to lose. Those are both very important. And I think the service part of her, Althea used to say, watch your serve,
Mhm.
you know, you know, keep up your serve. And everyone has stood and they just knew that meant tennis. No, it meant the service to those that are in the human race with us. We're not here by ourselves. She totally understood the purpose of a village. She understood it. And she knows that without that, we don't move forward. Not entirely without that support. So those are the lessons that I take away when I think of Althea. And the one thing that is on the darker side of it for me is that she did not see this light while she was alive. She did not see the accolades in this manner. She didn't see children and people just in awe of her accomplishments the way she should have. And, this year is the 75th anniversary of her breaking the color barrier, which is huge. In Lake Nona, which is where the USTA headquarters is, there is a loft hotel that has the Althea Event Center. Her name is in lights on a hotel. And 74 years ago, she couldn't even walk through the front door of a hotel. She couldn't use the bathroom or eat or stay in those hotels. And she was the number one tennis player in the world. And it warms my heart that people understand not just her value in the world of tennis, but the world, period. And I think that's where we're getting. Make sure you guys, she's on the US quarter this year. So make sure you watch out for the quarters because you may get one with Althea on it. It's like so cool. It's so cool.
Well, I'm glad you talked about some of the things that she never got to see, because my next question, I would love to start with you. We do a lot of all girls camps here. We started doing them a couple of years ago. They all sell out. They're such a popular thing that we do. And we're looking for ways to make sure we're connecting our history in a way that inspires these young girls. So when you think about how we can do that, how we can inspire more young people, but in my mind, especially girls, because it's Women's History Month,
Hmm.
to be leaders in sport, in community, and in business, what do you think are the most important things that we can do?
Well, for me, always visual representation is very important. If I see it, then I know that it exists and I can achieve it. So for me, always showing them the accomplishments, what is already happened, which is also knowing, that whole concept of knowing where you've been, so you know where you go. But I think the visualization of an Althea, right? Of a Lucy, of a Katrina, Billie Jean King, Billie Jean King is a staunch supporter of Althea for so many reasons. One of them being tennis, for so many reasons because she represents so much. But I have to say that one of the things that I think turned the tide for Althea was the investment that Dr. J, Dr. Eaton, and the people in her village made in her. They showed her value. They showed her what she could be. And then she was able to be it. So they kind of, once people pour into you, it is so much easier to stand tall. Um, because it's no judgment. They believe in you and they're going to be there to get you to where you can be. So without that support, the Althea that we have today, I don't think we would have.
I think we all have those stories of those moments where somebody came to us and said, have you ever considered this? And you're like, no, no, I could never do that. And that person tells you, yes, you can. So that moment is so powerful. And I think particularly for us as women, because sometimes we haven't seen that example of a woman doing something. And so it doesn't even enter our brain that we could do that. So thank you for sharing that. Jolynn, I want to ask you the same question. What do you think we can do to inspire more young people, especially girls, to be leaders in sport, in community, and in business?
The things that come to mind for me are exposure to the sport. I think about the times when I was in college, every summer that I was at home, I taught in the U.S. NJTL. I did NJTL every summer out there baking in that heat from 12 to 4. And, it brought a lot of the urban kids into having that exposure. And some of those kids, some were guys, but some of them went on to get involved in the USTA up in the Mid Atlantic. But I would say exposing them, whether it's, giving them tickets to some of the tournaments that come to town. DC has the big tournament up at 16th and Kennedy. We used to go there all the time. My brothers used to be ball boys, and we would just love to go there and watch the matches because Ash would play up there. I would also say promoting volunteerism. If there's an opportunity for uh, teenagers to volunteer, here in Richmond, I one of the coaches is a friend, and he will always ask me to come speak to the kids about my background with tennis. And they have engaged teenage girls from the private schools to come and help teach the younger kids how to play. And I think, that's remarkable because these kids obviously come from backgrounds where they probably might have a tennis court in their backyard, but they are out there dedicated. I've seen them, multiple times do that. And then maybe enroll, have more programs for kids to be enrolled in summer tennis. One of the things that really disturbs me about Lynchburg is, as I have been trying to connect with the community there is no NJTL program. There is no formalized tennis program. I met with the Parks and Rec people, and I said, God, this is where the sport was integrated. What the heck is going on? Why is there, there's country club tennis because they've got a couple of clubs, but there is no formalized tennis for the urban youth. And one of the guys that I know who had been on our board said that he's a former he's a retired principal. He said we can't get the guys to play. And I said, well, maybe we should focus on the girls, yeah, because they have these girls on the run programs. And these are, again, opportunities to get these young girls out there. And the other thing I think is good, every chance that somebody asks me to speak at something, I love to do it. But speaking to them about the advantages of playing tennis, one other thing that was so beneficial to me and my family is that we traveled a lot. Maybe my brothers travel more than the girls, because they got to go to the Sugar Bowl and Kalamazoo and stuff like that. My sister and I weren't, probably at the same level, but we traveled a lot. Excuse me. And then the physical attributes of playing as it relates to your health. And then the other thing is we develop lifelong friends. So I have friends that played in Lynchburg that I still talk to. Now, several have since passed away, but we used to call each other every weekend. Some would come visit when my grandfather got inducted at Newport. I invited people, didn't know that they would come, but they came and flew there and participated. There was a busload of people from New York that came, and I think Leslie Allen and several people arranged that. But again, it just makes it makes you feel like the village is like their blood. The village is blood for us, because this is how we continue to get, and the exposure for these kids is just tremendous. And so my friend that teaches here, the kids that they're with Richmond Tennis Association, they are phenomenal. I've gotten out there to try to hit with them, but like I can't do the heat too much. I hate this heat. And but it's just remarkable how well they play. Remarkable. So it's a lot of girls. And I always say, let me know when you're going to be here or there, because I will come, I'll show up, and just share and be expose them to what I can expose them to.
I think that's amazing. And I know it's hotter in Florida, but you both have an open invitation anytime you want to join us. We'll put you on a panel inside in the air conditioning. So
that
if
would
you
be
would
great.
like to do that, would love to have you come speak to some of our campers as well. I do want to talk a little bit about women. So when we move from girls to women, I wanted to ask both of you, when you think about women, tennis, and leadership today, what comes to mind that we're doing well? And maybe where do we still need to do more advocacy? And so, Michelle, I'll start with you again, and then Jolynn, you can share your thoughts too.
I think we have come a long way. I think we brought a lot into the light. I think we continue to build that to build that legacy, that foundation, so that people could live off of it, could bite off of it, could use it to move forward in life. When I think of advocacy in tennis, the first name that comes to my mind is Billie Jean King. um, and I think that she's been a driving force, in moving us through different places and spaces, to keep certain important elements in the light. Um, what I think we can do better, I don't know if better is the right word. What we could do more is, I think a lot of what Jolynn said is the visibility. It is the continuing telling of the I stories. It is almost planting, us in certain places and spaces, so that we can keep that conversation going. I think people relate very well to I stories and personal experiences, much more so than saying, here, read this book. Learn about this person reading this book. So I think, doing more of what we're doing, of what you're doing, these podcasts, and bringing things forward, so that there is this platform where people know they can go to when they want more information about something, that it's available, and that it is truthful.
That's important.
That has become a very important part of the technology and the social media that we live in. But yeah, just to keep going, to keep chugging along, and just to realize, I think about it. Someone gave me a gift once, and it's actually a light cover, and it says, "The moment I think I'm tired, I think about what Harriet Tubman did." And so I think about that. So to the moments where I'm disappointed that people don't know who Althea is, that people don't know her story, that they don't know her village. When I get disappointed, I think, well, but I didn't live it. You know what I'm saying? I didn't go through what Althea had to go through. And the least I can do is to spotlight that, so that people understand who she is and what she really brought to the table. The same with the Billie Jean King, with all of the women who were the first, with all of the women who broke the barrier. 2 years ago, for Women's International Day, Mercedes-Benz did a short video, and which is available on YouTube. And it is not about Mercedes-Benz. It is actually a tribute to women. And the theme is, I don't want to be the first woman. I want to be one of many. And it's probably about 3 or 4 minutes. But if you get a chance, look at it. It's such a great piece of work. And Althea is featured in that. But it's the message is that yes, the first is so important, but we want many. And that's what the visibility and that momentum will give us.
It's funny you mentioned that Mercedes-Benz ad because I think General Motors did an ad this month, and I believe Mary Barra is the CEO of General Motors, and they did an ad this month for cars just like built by men, and they took out all the things that were invented by women. And so in this really short ad clip that's just like a minute long, it's meant to be satirical, but it's pretty fascinating the way that they did it because things like windshield wipers, things that we use every day that women didn't get credit for inventing.
Yep.
Here they are with an ad that's sort of helping people visualize the contributions that women have made in a different way. And I love to see that happening now where, that wasn't a thing when I was growing up for sure. I didn't know those things. And there's a lot more now. And to your point about truth, hopefully we can flood the zone with a lot more truth and facts and good things because we certainly need it.
Yes, we definitely need it.
Jolynn, I want to give you an opportunity to share when you think about women tennis and leadership, what do you think is going well and where maybe do we still need to do more advocacy?
Well, what I think has gone well is having equity in pay, because when Althea was coming along, she was not compensated the same way. And I think there was a lot of angst for her. I think it kind of drove her into a more reclusive state. I know that it did. I shouldn't say I think, I know that it did. And because, by the time Ash and those guys were doing what they did 68, 75, they were making more money. But today, the equity, and this has probably been more of a driving force by Billie Jean King and others. But again, times were different. And I don't know, I think maybe if she had put it all in perspective and just, acknowledged that, yep, it was different in 41 than it would be in 75. As things progress, you're going to get paid more. But I think there have been huge strides with that. The other thing that I would say where there's a need, training facilities and programs, along with maybe funding for people of color and support with equipment. When my grandfather did his program, those kids paid for nothing. No housing, he had a huge account with Wilson Sporting Goods. He would get rackets, equipment, clothing, and he would use his village in Lynchburg and beyond to house these kids, feed these kids, and all of that. And I bring up the training and facilities because I live right across the street from a racket club here in Richmond. And Ash could never play at that club. I did see Serena there. She and Alexandra Stevenson came. I don't know I don't know that she played. It was maybe a luncheon type thing, maybe a speaking engagement. And this has been probably back in the 90s. But the thing that I know is that my buddy who has this program with Richmond Tennis, he has been allowed, some of these clubs will allow the kids to come in for the winter and play in the bubble. And there was a time where they wouldn't charge them. And they don't have, these offshoot little groups don't have the money. It would be nice if there would be a continuation of allowing these urban kids to play in these bubbles for nothing. I mean, the kids are dedicated, the parents are dedicated. And I remember when we played, and we all went to private schools in DC, Bethesda, and McLean. My father rented a Marriott warehouse out in Bethesda. And when he got off work, he would truck us out to Bethesda, set up a regulation tennis net in this warehouse, and we might play until 10 o'clock, 10:30. Get home, we got to come home and study, do work. And then we'd be angry, hangry, and my mother would be like, you know, because we'd be upset with him because he just pushed us so hard. And she's like, you all shouldn't play tennis if you can't get along. But, you know, you think about the opportunities. So again, I think things have progressed significantly. Having equitable pay has been tremendous for these women in this sport. But I also feel like it would be nice if there could be some collaboration with some of these local groups. And I don't know how much involvement you all would have with that, but you know, just for them to recognize the impact of how they're helping is assisting these kids get to another level.
I think
'Cause
that ask, I mean, whether it's a club or a teaching professional, I mean, one of the things that I take away from what your grandfather did, Jolynn, is he gave his time, energy, money, and effort.
Mhm.
And back to Althea, like work on your serve. We are fortunate we have incredible teaching professionals at very high level who are choosing to give their time, energy, and talent back to the community. They could be making more money doing something else, but yet they choose to give back and to serve others. And I think if we can get more of that, whether it's a club or, you know, somebody that just works in tennis, whatever your time, energy, and talent is, take 10% of it and give it back for free.
Mhm.
I think that's the ask here. And we just got to keep saying it and keep asking. And sometimes we just don't ask enough for people to give it. Anyone in the public park space, we ask every time we show up, we say, do you require some of your teaching professionals to spend this amount of hours on the court
Yeah.
with free or low cost programs? And you'd be surprised how many times they don't even make the ask. And we're like, that's a simple ask to make. So I love that you said that. And that's one of my biggest takeaways from these stories is that if we all give some of that extra time that, yes, we could be using in other ways, boy, what a difference we could really make. Last question. We're wrapping up our time here, so I just want to open it to see if you have any closing thoughts you'd like to share with our listeners today. And Jolynn, I'll give you sort of the first platform, and then Michelle, you can bring us home.
Okay. So, you know, I guess back along the vein of moving the needle forward. I mean, I think that tennis has come a long, long way. I think that there are a lot of things that we could do, you know, and I certainly do as much as I can because my son always gets on me about how I don't want you to have to be the one that does all of this, you know, the speaking engagements. I like that stuff. I love to be able to share the story, but I also think that it's got to be a continued collaboration with people that have the ability and the power to make more significant change. And also, you know, like you said, just to make this a part of the ask, can you do these other things? Can you help? I shouldn't have to call a club 50 times and never get through. You know, everybody has an answering service that picks up. I mean, if I want to get to the general manager or somebody to ask about hosting an event. The other thing that I haven't seen a lot of, and maybe it's just because I'm not out in the tennis like I used to be, there used to be exhibition matches that happened all the time. And Laura, I'm going to come to you when we finally get this house together. I would love to have somebody from the USTA. I was at the Centennial, the Mid-Atlantic Centennial. Francis Tiafoe was at the table across from me. I would love to have somebody like that come and play on that court, but I need somebody's help to help me facilitate. And also maybe make tickets available to some of these big events. Like I know you all do Children's Day at the USTA, but towards some of those final matches, bring in some of those kids to participate and be able to see. I mean, the enthusiasm, even for me, who's a player of long ago, and I still play every now and then. It is when I was there in 2019, and I've been to like three. That was my third U.S. Open. The enthusiasm and energy of being in that box, and I wasn't in the box. It was the little suite. But even so, just to see people play that, and who they are, it's just exhilarating. And I think for a kid who is learning the sport or thinking about it, or we want to expose, that would just be tremendous. Tremendous.
I think you're going to be really happy to see some of that happen this year at the Open.
Okay.
I know our president, Brian Bahaley, is really digging into how can we create more of those opportunities for the communities you mentioned. So I'm excited to see what that task force comes up with. And certainly we need to be working better with even the tournaments in our own sections, things like Indian Wells, Miami Open, right? The big tournaments that are really even hard for us to get into. How do we create more opportunities there as part of the grants that they receive from USTA? So thank you so much for calling that particular action item out. I love
Absolutely. Thank
that.
you.
I'll be your partner in that for sure.
Thanks.
All right, Michelle, you get to bring us home. What closing thoughts would you like to share with our audience?
Well, one, I would, as always, I'm thankful. I'm thankful to the USTA. I'm thankful to the ATA. I'm thankful to all of these entities, the schools. There is a pre-K and K school in East Orange, New Jersey called the Althea Early Education Academy. And they are committed to teaching children at a young age Althea's legacy, as well as exposing them to tennis and golf. Because for those that don't know, she also broke the color barrier in golf. And exposing them, and also music, because she was a musician. So Althea had many talents. Some of us come here with a whole array of talents for us to develop. And she was a person who was in the right place at the right time. And there are so many like her. And I think that without the opportunities, without the exposure, without those of us volunteering, without those mentoring, coaching, that we don't get a chance to pull these out of our young ones. And that is what's important. And I think that once we all put our heads together so that we can create that space, however it may look, because it may look different spaces for different age groups, different cultures, different locales, but to create those spaces and to create something that's intergenerational, so that we have those that are leading today literally transferring knowledge and exposure and access to those that will lead tomorrow. And I think that through tennis, through civic engagement, through all these aspects and elements of life, that's really just the basics of it. And for me, tennis is something I advocate for, because I'm way too old to chase balls now, but so that I advocate for. But what they learn, playing tennis, it's just unmatched. For me, it's the only sport that you can play in a group or single. It is, the sport that uses math, its velocity, its speed. It is actually a sport that college advisors say to, STEM students, science, technology, engineering, and math. Listen, this is some heady stuff. You need something to take your mind off of it. Maybe you'll play tennis. That was suggested to me when my son was an undergrad. And I went, why would you choose tennis? And he explained it. It is math, right? The speed is velocity.
Physics, it's all of
It's,
those
it's,
things.
it's healthy. It incorporates so many elements that we need to grow and develop. And I would just like to see that become more visible across the board. And we can all participate in that. And it's just something we can do together. It takes a village.
Oh, I love that. Well, we're out of time, but this has been such a joy, and I'm sure it won't be the last time we talk. Like I said, open invitation to Florida, and I have a feeling that we'll be in the same room again frequently in the future. And we're just definitely supportive of the work that you both are doing. So thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
That's all for this edition of the Here to Serve podcast. For all episodes of the podcast, including upcoming topics and dates, visit USTAFlorida.com/here to serve. And to all the women who are leading in business, in sports, and particularly in tennis, thank you for all you do to inspire the next generation of girls and women to lead the game.